Tonight, we're going to Paris, to the Place Vendôme, where the streetlights melt onto the wet cobblestones like liquid gold, and the ghosts of kings and queens watch from behind the windows of silent, impossibly expensive shops. Imagine standing in the center of that perfect stone octagon just after the last chauffeur has driven away for the night. The air is cold and still. You hear the distant siren of a lonely ambulance, the soft click-clack of a woman's heels on her way home, and maybe, just maybe, the faintest sound of a plan coming together somewhere in the shadows just beyond the light. Somewhere in a quiet apartment in the 18th arrondissement, a man is staring at a photograph. He's not a gangster, he's a designer. But the lines he's looking at tonight aren't for a new building or a piece of furniture. They're the sight lines of the security cameras inside the Ritz Hotel. And he's about to create something that will be gone in 60 seconds. You probably wouldn't last 5 minutes on his crew, not because of the violence, but because of the incredible, maddening precision you'd have to find inside yourself. So before we get started, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe if this is your kind of late-night story. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Dim your screen, settle in, and let's walk into the heart of this thing together. The apartment smells faintly of damp concrete and coffee that's been sitting too long. A cheap electric heater ticks softly in the corner, pushing warm air that does little to fight the January chill seeping through the old window panes. A man we'll call the architect stands by the window. One hand rests on the cold glass. The other holds a pencil he hasn't used in an hour. He doesn't fidget, but the ritual matters. Paris, below him, is a slow-moving river of amber light and quiet routine. The city, famous for its defiant beauty and its centuries of secrets, hums with a strange kind of confidence. The locals know that Paris has seen everything. Wars, revolutions, floods. It has learned to be unimpressed. But the architect knows better. It's not confidence, it's complacency. He's in his late 30s, but tonight, under the weight of an idea so simple it feels like a memory, he feels timeless. The air holds a kind of pressure, like a secret that's about to break. Not loudly, but with that quiet, satisfying shatter of glass that was always meant to be broken. Behind him, the door to the small bedroom creaks. His associate, a young man we'll call the writer, leans in. He's coiled tight, nervous energy radiating from him like heat. "They're here," he says, his voice a low hum. The architect turns. The pencil is placed silently on a stack of architectural drawings. Inside, a group of men wait. They're not from the city center. They're from the banlieue, the suburbs that circle Paris like a concrete collar. Rougher hands, harder eyes. They wear dark tracksuits, their expensive sneakers immaculate, their expressions carefully balanced between professional respect and deep skepticism. They're not here for small talk. They're here to see if this quiet designer is for real. This was the architect, the conductor of a plan born from a security blueprint and a deep boredom with a world that only valued things that lasted. He ruled his small apartment not like a crime boss, but like a meticulous planner who hated crooked lines and imprecise measurements. He was about to apply that same precision to a jewelry case. The silence he's cultivated wraps around the men like a threat. The conversation is brief, whispered. They discuss the thickness of the display glass, the average response time of the Brigade Anti-Criminalité, the traffic patterns on the Rue de Rivoli at 6:30 p.m., a problem with one of the scooters. The engine is running too loud. The architect listens more than he speaks. His fingers tap the table. A slow, steady rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. "We can find another scooter," one of the men says, his voice a low gravel. The architect looks up, finally. "Neither," he says. "We fix the problem, not create new ones. We muffle the engine, we stick to the plan." There's a pause. Not a challenge, just the sound of professionals recalculating the odds around a new variable. This designer doesn't speak like a thug, but his stillness is louder than any threat they've ever heard. It's deliberate, like cutting a piece of glass in a room full of people holding their breath.
After the meeting, the architect walks to the back of the building, past the small, sad courtyard where a single skeletal tree grows. A cat sleeps on a rusted drain pipe. Above them, the sky is a flat, starless gray. He climbs a small fire escape to the roof. He does this every night. He returns to the place where the wind has no agenda, where the city becomes a map of lights, where he can feel the weight of his plan without anyone seeing his shoulders tense. Tonight, though, he thinks he sees someone on a distant balcony, watching him through binoculars. Or maybe it's just a trick of the light. It doesn't matter. He knows he's being watched by the police, by rival crews, by the universe itself. When you plan something this big, you become the center of a gravity well. He sits on the cool, damp tiles, the city spread before him like a promise. The heater is still ticking below. Shadows crawl across the walls of his apartment. In the distance, the Eiffel Tower sparkles, its punctual show of lights a comfort to tourists, a clock to everyone else. The architect's phone buzzes, a message from a number with no name. The axes are clean. He deletes it without replying. The entrance they would use wasn't the grand, famous one where photographers wait for celebrities. It was a side door on the Rue Cambon. A service entrance, technically, but one that opened into a public gallery of shops. No doorman, no velvet ropes. Just a heavy glass door and the quiet hum of commerce. The hotel and its effort to seem accessible to the immensely wealthy had created a small, elegant flaw. At 6:31 p.m., a gendarmerie patrol car passes the corner of the Place Vendôme and the Rue de Castiglione. Its route is as predictable as the tides. The architect knows this. He also knows that at 6:33 p.m., the security guard inside the Ritz's shopping gallery takes his 10-minute coffee break, relieved by a colleague who is always 17 seconds late. 17 seconds, an eternity. The men in his apartment are instruments, chosen for their function. One is large, a former demolition worker we'll call the muscle. He knows how to break things with an almost surgical precision. The rider is the best scooter pilot in the northern suburbs of Paris, able to navigate the labyrinthine streets of Paris as if he'd drawn them himself. And the other two, the lookouts, are ghosts, capable of blending into any crowd, of being utterly forgettable seconds after you've seen them. The architect himself would not be there. He would be 2 blocks away, in a small rented room overlooking the Tuileries Garden. He would have a police scanner, a stopwatch, and a view of the street that would tell him everything he needed to know. He was the mind, they were the hands, and the 60 seconds belonged to them all. He had a contact, of course, a woman who worked in the hotel's administrative offices, not as a cleaner or a waitress, but as an accountant. A woman who saw the hotel not as a place of magic, but as a series of numbers on a spreadsheet. Security upgrades, insurance premiums, staff schedules. She had provided him with the blueprints, not for money, but for the same reason he was doing this, for the sheer, quiet pleasure of seeing a perfect system disrupted. She believed the world had become too predictable. She had called him last night. Her voice was calm, almost bored. They're servicing the magnetic lock on the Rue Cambon door tomorrow morning. It will be offline for 12 hours. She didn't wish him luck. She just hung up.
The architect pulls his coat tighter. The wind is cold on the rooftop. He thinks about the jewels. Not their value, but their permanence. Diamonds formed over billions of years under the Earth's pressure. He was about to steal them in 60 seconds. There was a kind of poetry in that, a conversation with time itself. He stands up. The watcher on the distant balcony is gone. But in its place, a small red laser dot appears on the chimney next to him, dances for a second, and then vanishes. It's not a warning. It's a message. Someone else knows, and they're not the police. The cold January air hangs over Paris like a held breath. The city is settled into its evening rhythm, a symphony of traffic, distant sirens, and the low hum of a million lives unfolding behind stone walls. The grand hotels around the Place Vendôme are islands of warmth and light, their windows glowing like embers in the encroaching dark. Inside the Ritz, chandeliers drip with crystal light, casting a soft, forgiving glow on the hushed conversations and the quiet clink of silverware on porcelain. In the small, gallery-like corridor that runs along the Rue Cambon, the jewelry boutiques are at their most seductive. They are curated boxes of pure desire, their treasures lit with the precision of a museum exhibit. Diamonds, emeralds, sapphires, all resting on dark velvet, waiting. They seem to be in a world of their own, protected not just by glass and alarms, but by an aura of untouchable prestige. But some corners of Paris never really sleep. And tonight, a different kind of energy is gathering in the shadows. In a small, nondescript room a few blocks away, the architect sits in a straight-backed chair, watching the city through a pair of powerful, military-grade binoculars. He isn't watching the Ritz directly. He's watching a reflection of the Rue Cambon entrance in the large window of an office building across the street. It's an indirect view, a ghost image of the target. He prefers it that way. It reminds him that this is about angles, about seeing what others miss. The police scanner on the table beside him murmurs with the mundane chatter of the city's protectors. A minor traffic accident on the Boulevard Haussmann, a noise complaint in Montmartre. The city is breathing its normal, slow evening breath. Inside the car, parked 2 streets away, his lieutenant, the rioter, pulls on a pair of thin leather gloves. He's not the one going in, but the ritual matters. "You sure about the 17 seconds?" he asks into a small encrypted radio. The architect's voice comes back, calm and flat. The universe is built on smaller numbers than that. The rider chuckles, a short, sharp burst of nervous energy. Bold, he leans back, watching the street. Or stupid. The architect's voice is unhurried. Sometimes they're the same thing. There's a pause. Then the architect speaks again, slower this time. They put a new camera on the corner, a panoramic one. The rider turns his head. "You think we're being watched?" "I know we are." Many people still think that heists are about brute force, that you smash a wall, grab the cash, and run. But the architect wasn't a smasher. He was a student of systems. He knew that every fortress has a flaw, a blind spot, a place where the architects got lazy or overconfident. And for the Ritz, that flaw was its own elegance. Its desire to be open, to be a part of the city, had created a seam.
Case in point, the hotel's head of security, a man everyone called le penseur, the thinker. Not because he was a great philosopher, but because his primary security tactic was to stand in the lobby for hours with his chin in his hand, trying to look intimidatingly thoughtful. He was a creature of habit, a man who believed that security was a performance, and the architect hated him. Not because le penseur was a threat, but because he was a distraction. He was so focused on the grand stage of the main lobby that he had forgotten about the side door. So when the architect's contact inside the hotel informs him that le penseur has scheduled a surprise security drill for that very evening, He doesn't send a warning. He sends a distraction. A small, perfectly timed, anonymous tip to the fire department about a faulty smoke detector in the hotel's main kitchen. Le Penseur, who believes that a fire drill is far more traumatic and visible than a security drill, immediately cancels his own plan to supervise the more impressive spectacle of a full hotel evacuation. He spends the entire evening coordinating with the fire brigade, striding through the lobby with a walkie-talkie, feeling important. He never once thinks to check the quiet little gallery on the Rue Cambon. Message received. Meanwhile, the architect returns to his ritual: the rooftop, the wind, the unlit cigarette. No, not tonight. Tonight, he's in the rented room, the city spread before him, a living blueprint. Tonight, he's not alone. His contact, the accountant, joins him. She brings 2 paper cups of coffee. She doesn't ask if the plan is ready. She doesn't need to. She just sits beside him. "You're thinking again," she says. He considers. "No," he says, "just listening." And that, somehow, sounds more honest than anything else he said all day. Down below, the city continues to breathe, and the architect, he listens to the streets, to the silence, to the tiny noises that tell him when something's off. Because this city doesn't yell, it whispers. And tonight, he hears something new. The faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of a helicopter, far to the south. A police helicopter, perhaps, or just a news crew. He turns toward the edge of his vision, back to the reflection in the window. The phone buzzes once. New message. We're in position. He stares into the dark. This isn't about money anymore. It's about art. The kind that doesn't belong in a museum. The kind that gets people erased without explanation. He slips the phone into his pocket and picks up the stopwatch. Slower now. Measured. By the time he looks back at the street, the rider is already waiting in an alley, the scooter's engine a low, muffled purr. "Ready?" The rider's voice crackles over the radio. The architect doesn't answer immediately. He glances at the streetlight flickering above the alley, then back to the reflection of the Ritz, still glowing, still complacent. "No," he says. "We wait for the 17 seconds." The rider swallows. He knows what that means. That's where the plan either becomes legend or falls apart. Because when you're about to smash a hole in the heart of Paris, you need more than a plan. You need faith in the tiny, invisible cracks in time itself. The air in the Rue Cambon is sharp and cold, carrying the faint scent of rain and expensive leather from the nearby boutiques. At 6:32 p.m., the street is in a state of quiet transition. The last of the day's shoppers are hurrying home, their faces buried in scarves. A black sedan with diplomatic plates glides silently to a stop, dropping off a guest who disappears into the main entrance of the hotel. The city is performing its nightly ritual of shutting down, unaware that a very different kind of performance is about to begin. The crew moves into position, not as a group, but as individuals, like chess pieces sliding into their final squares. The muscle, a large man in a dark overcoat, pauses to look at the display in a neighboring shop window. He looks like any other tourist, slightly lost, slightly impressed. The 2 lookouts have separated. One buys a newspaper from a nearby kiosk, his eyes never leaving the street. The other strolls casually past the hotel entrance, his pace unhurried, his hands in his pockets. They are ghosts, already forgotten by anyone who might have glanced their way. In the rented room, the architect's eyes are fixed on the reflection in the window. His thumb rests on the button of his stopwatch. The police scanner murmurs. Nothing. The city is calm. He watches the security guard inside the gallery. The man stretches, yawns, then glances at his watch. 6:33 p.m. He turns and walks slowly towards the back office, disappearing from view. The architect's gaze shifts to the corner, waiting for the replacement guard. 1 second. 2. 3.
The replacement guard doesn't appear. 10 seconds. 11. 12. The architect's heart is a steady, slow drum. This is it. The 17-second window created by human habit, by the simple, predictable fact that one man is always eager to leave and another is never eager to arrive. He presses a button on his encrypted radio. A single, silent signal is sent. On the street, the muscle straightens up. The lookout with the newspaper folds it under his arm. They begin to walk towards the glass door of the Ritz Gallery. Not running, walking. The first sound is not the smash. It is the soft thud of a rubber wedge being kicked under the heavy glass door, preventing it from closing. The magnetic lock had been serviced that morning. It was disengaged. They don't break the door. They simply open it and step inside. The gallery is empty. A long, silent corridor of impossible wealth. The air smells of potpourri and money. The architect starts the stopwatch. The muscle walks directly to the first display case. He doesn't hesitate. From beneath his coat, he produces a small, heavy axe with a short handle. It's not a tool of brute force. It's a tool of precision. He raises it. The first strike is not wild. It is aimed at a single point on the reinforced glass, a point the architect had identified from the manufacturer's blueprints as the most vulnerable to percussive shock. The sound, inside the confined space, is not a crash. It is an explosion. Crack, boom! The glass does not shatter into a million tiny pieces. It fractures, a spiderweb of pure white lines spreading from the point of impact, and then it sags, defeated, falling inwards in large, heavy chunks. The alarm screams, a shrill electronic shriek that rips through the hotel's quiet dignity. The 60-second clock is running. The crew moves with a dreamlike efficiency. The muscle strikes the next case. Crack, boom. The two lookouts are already at the first, reaching through the jagged opening. Their hands, covered in black gloves, are like birds of prey swooping down to retrieve the glittering prizes. They don't grab everything. They grab the pieces the architect had circled on the photographs. A necklace known as the Empress's Tears, a collection of watches with diamond-encrusted faces, a set of matching sapphire rings. In the main lobby, heads turn. A concierge picks up a phone, his hand trembling slightly. Le Pinseur, the head of security, is on the other side of the hotel, dealing with the fire department's false alarm. He hears the alarm, but his mind is on smoke, not jewels. 20 seconds gone. The bags are filling up. The jewels are cold and heavy. One of the lookouts glances down the corridor towards the main lobby. He sees the first signs of movement. A security guard, his face pale with shock, is starting to run towards them. The lookout gives a low whistle, the signal to leave. In his room, the architect watches the stopwatch. 30 seconds. He hears the first panicked shouts on the police scanner. The response has begun, but in Paris, a response is measured in minutes, not seconds, and they only need one. The crew doesn't run. They retreat. Backing out of the gallery, they move as one, their eyes still scanning, their movements fluid. They slip back through the propped-open door onto the Rue Cambon, just as the first security guard reaches the shattered display cases. He sees nothing but destruction and the faint echo of their presence. 45 seconds. The street is no longer calm. A few brave onlookers have pulled out their phones. A taxi driver is yelling into his radio. The city is waking up to the fact that it has been violated. The architect watches the reflection. He sees his crew emerge. And then he sees something else. A black car, not a police car, screeching to a halt at the corner. Two men get out. They are not in uniform. They move with a speed and purpose that is not civilian. The red laser dot from the rooftop. Someone else was here. Someone else was watching. The escape was meant to be a masterpiece of urban dispersal, a vanishing act performed on a stage of controlled chaos. As the crew emerged from the quiet gallery into the sudden sharp reality of the street, the second phase of the architect's plan was supposed to click into place like the gears of a perfect watch. But Paris is not a machine. It is a living, breathing organism, and sometimes it has its own will to believe. The plan was for a clean split. The muscle and one lookout were to head east on foot, their large frames swallowed by the crowds on the Rue de Rivoli, their destination the vast anonymous labyrinth of the Château Les Halles metro station. The other lookout was to hand off the primary bag of jewels to the rider, who would be waiting, his scooter's engine a low, impatient purr. As they burst onto the Rue Cambon, the rider was there. He pulled his scooter alongside the curb, a dark, nimble insect ready to fly. The lookout with the heaviest bag moved to make the handoff. And that's when the black car appeared. It came from the direction of the Place de la Concorde, moving too fast, its tires hissing on the damp pavement. It wasn't a police car. It had no sirens, no flashing lights. It was a sleek, unmarked sedan, and it moved with a predatory grace. It mounted the curb, blocking the rider's escape route. The architect, watching through his binoculars from the rented room, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was not in the plan. This was the variable he had seen, but not understood. The laser dot, the watcher on the rooftop.
Two men in dark, tailored suits emerged from the car. They moved with the cold efficiency of professionals. They were not police. They were something else. Private security? A rival crew? Intelligence agents? It was impossible to know. One of them drew a weapon, not a standard police-issue pistol. It was smaller, sleeker, with a suppressor. He didn't aim at the crew. He aimed at the front tire of the scooter. A soft sound, lost in the noise of the alarms, and the tire exploded. The scooter slumped to one side, useless. The rider, his escape route gone, froze for a fraction of a second. It was all the time the men in suits needed. They converged on him and the lookout with the bag. There was no shouting, just a swift, brutal, silent takedown. The lookout was shoved to the ground. The bag of jewels was snatched away. The other members of the crew, seeing the plan collapsing, reacted on pure instinct. The muscle, seeing his comrades being attacked, turned to intervene. It was a foolish, brave, and fatal mistake. The second man in the suit raised his weapon. Another soft pfft, and the muscle stumbled, a look of pure surprise on his face before collapsing to the ground. The heist had become something else. It was no longer a robbery. It was an interception. The remaining two lookouts, seeing the violence, did the only thing they could. They ran. They dropped their own smaller bags of jewels and fled into the night, their minds screaming with one thought: survive. The men in suits were ruthlessly efficient. They had what they came for. They ignored the dropped jewels, ignored the fleeing lookouts. They grabbed the stunned and disarmed rider, bundled him into the back of their car, and sped away, melting back into the Parisian traffic as quickly as they had appeared. The entire street-side encounter had taken less than 20 seconds. To the few onlookers, it was an incomprehensible blur of motion. A robbery, followed by a shoot-up, followed by a kidnapping. By the time the first real police cars arrived, sirens wailing, all they found was a scene of utter chaos. One man down on the pavement, two smaller bags of jewels scattered across the cobblestones, a disabled scooter, and a handful of terrified witnesses who could only babble about a black car and men in suits. 3 of the crew were gone. The muscle neutralized on the street, the rider taken, the lookout who was with him also likely captured. The 2 who had run were now just desperate fugitives. And the architect? He was still in the rented room, his stopwatch still running, but he was no longer timing a heist. He was timing the complete and utter disintegration of his perfect plan. He lowered his binoculars. His face was a mask of cold, analytical calm, but inside, a single terrifying question was forming.
Who were they? And how did they know? He packed his equipment, the police scanner, the binoculars, the encrypted radio. He wiped every surface. He walked out of the room, down the stairs, and into the garden. He did not head for the street. He went to the back alley, just as he had planned. But his escape was no longer the triumphant walk of a successful mastermind. It was the quiet, desperate retreat of a man who had just realized he was a pawn in a much, much larger game. The aftermath was not a police investigation. It was a cleanup. By the time the official gendarmerie cordoned off the Rue Cambon, the scene had already been subtly altered. The body of the muscle was gone. The disabled scooter had vanished. The witnesses were being quietly and firmly debriefed, not by uniformed police officers, but by stern-faced men in plain clothes who showed badges that no one recognized.
The official story, the one that would hit the newspapers the next morning, would be a masterpiece of misdirection. It would be about a botched robbery, a gang of thieves from the suburbs who had overestimated their abilities. It would mention that 3 suspects were apprehended at the scene, a convenient fiction lumping the rider and the captured lookout in with the neutralized muscle. It would praise the quick response of the hotel security and the police. It would report that most of the 4 million euros worth of jewels were recovered. It would be a neat, tidy story designed to reassure the public and the hotel's wealthy clientele that the situation was under control. It was all a lie. In a secure, soundproofed room somewhere deep within the city's hidden infrastructure, the rider was being questioned. His interrogators were not interested in the jewels. They were interested in one name: the architect. Who was he? Where did he get his information? Who was the woman on the inside? The rider, a man of the streets, was tough, but he was not prepared for this. This was a level of pressure and professionalism he had never encountered. Meanwhile, the 2 lookouts who had escaped were being hunted, not just by the police, but by the same shadowy organization that had intercepted the heist. They were loose ends, and in this world, loose ends are always tied up, one way or another. One was found 2 days later in a cheap hotel in Marseille, dead of an apparent overdose. The other simply vanished, his name becoming another ghost story whispered in the city's underworld. And the architect? He was running. He knew he was being pursued not by the slow, methodical arm of the law, but by something far more dangerous. He was a designer, a planner. He was not a field operative. He knew how to disappear from the police, but disappearing from people who didn't officially exist was a different problem altogether. He moved through a series of safe houses he had prepared years ago, contingencies for a different kind of failure: an old artist studio in Montparnasse, a forgotten cellar beneath a bakery in the Latin Quarter. Each time he moved, he felt the net tightening. He would see the same faces in the crowds: a man reading a newspaper too intently, a woman talking on a phone with no one on the other end. They were closing in. He had to know who they were. He reached out to his only contact, the accountant. He used a dead drop, a hollowed-out book left in a quiet corner of the Shakespeare & Company bookstore. His message was simple: who are they? The reply came a day later in the same book, a single typed word: Sentinels. The name meant nothing and everything. It wasn't a government agency, it wasn't a criminal organization, it was something else. A private entity, perhaps, hired by the ultra-wealthy to protect their interests beyond the reach of the law? A rogue intelligence cell? The architect's mind raced through the possibilities. He realized the truth with a sickening clarity. The jewels were not the target. He was. The entire heist had been a test, a complex, brutally expensive, and deadly job interview. They weren't trying to stop him. They were trying to recruit him. They had watched him plan, watched him execute, and then they had dismantled his work with surgical precision to show him who was truly in control. The message was clear: your skills are impressive, but you are working on the wrong side. His final safe house was a small, forgotten apartment that belonged to his late grandfather, a watchmaker. It smelled of oil and old metal. He sat at the old workbench, surrounded by the tiny, intricate tools of a forgotten trade. He felt a strange sense of peace. He had been so focused on deconstructing the systems of others that he had never stopped to consider that he himself was part of a larger system. He knew they would find him here. This was the end of the line.
The knock on the door came just after dawn. It wasn't a heavy police-style knock. It was a soft, polite tap. He opened the door. A woman stood there. She was impeccably dressed, her expression calm, her eyes intelligent. She was the one who had been on the rooftop. "We were very impressed," she said, her voice a cool, measured alto. She did not introduce herself. She didn't need to. "You passed." The architect looked at her. He thought of his crew. The muscle, dead on the street, the writer, taken, the others, erased. "Past what?" he asked, his voice hollow. "The audition," she replied, without a trace of irony. She held out a small, black business card. It was blank. "We believe your talents are being wasted. We can offer you a more challenging canvas." The aftermath of the Ritz heist never truly ended. It simply went silent. The official case was closed. The captured thieves were sentenced and sent to prison, their silence bought or forced. The recovered jewels were returned. The city of Paris breathed a collective sigh of relief and went back to its business of being beautiful and eternal. The story became a minor footnote in the hotel's long history, a brief, vulgar interruption that was best forgotten. But in the quiet, hidden world where real power resides, the story was just beginning. The architect made a choice. We will never know for sure what that choice was. Perhaps he took the blank card, accepting his place in a world of shadows and unseen influence, his brilliant mind now working on problems far more complex than a jewelry display case. Perhaps he became one of the sentinels, a ghost who ensures that the world's routines are never truly broken, only managed. Or perhaps he refused. Perhaps he chose to disappear on his own terms, using his considerable skills to finally become a true ghost, forever hunted, forever free. Maybe he is living in a sun-drenched city in South America, or a quiet village in the Alps, living a simple life under a new name, the memory of those 60 seconds in Paris a lifetime away. The mystery of what happened to the architect, the true story of the smash that vanished, became the real prize. The jewels were just props on a stage. The real heist was the acquisition of a man who could see the cracks in anything. Sometimes late at night, when the Place Vendôme is empty and the street lights cast their golden glow, you can almost feel the echo of that night, the memory of the shattering glass, the scream of the alarm, and the quiet, calculating presence of a man who designed a perfect 60-second masterpiece, only to discover it was merely a single brushstroke in a much larger and far more terrifying work of art. The Ritz still stands, as elegant and imposing as ever. The jewels still sparkle behind their new, even stronger glass, and the city still whispers its secrets. But for those who know how to listen, the silence around the Ritz is a little different now. It is heavier. It is the silence of a story that has been neatly and professionally buried, but not forgotten. And now, as our story of the Paris Ritz heist comes to its quiet, uncertain end, let the images of the black car and the blank business cards slowly fade from your mind. There's no need to hold on to the mystery now. Let it all go. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders, your arms, your hands. Your breathing is slow and deep. That's it. In and out. Imagine yourself sitting at a small round table in a quiet Parisian cafe late at night. It's warm inside. The only sound is the soft hiss of the espresso machine. Outside, a gentle rain is falling, blurring the streetlights into soft, hazy circles of gold. You are safe. You are comfortable. There is nowhere else you need to be. Your body is growing heavy, sinking into the softness of your bed.
Your eyelids are heavy, so very heavy. You are drifting now, aren't you? Drifting away from the story, away from the day, into the deep, calm ocean of sleep. There are no more questions to answer, no more puzzles to solve. Only the gentle rhythm of your own heart beating a slow, steady, peaceful tempo. Let it guide you into your dreams. Rest well. Dream softly. Good night.